I'm Dan Morris, you're watching Bosun Dan Bushcraft, and today we're tapping birch trees. So basically we're going to drill a hole in a birch tree, stick a tube in it into a bottle and see if we can't collect the delicious birch sap that resides within these things. So this time of year, birch trees and many other trees are forcing their sap upwards so that it can get to all the leaves and stuff and do the job that it needs to do. But birch, unlike a lot of trees, have a very, very thin, clear, watery, liquidy sap, which is very good for drinking straight from the tree. It's very nutritious and full of vitamins and good for you, but it's also really good, and here's my interest, for making birch sap wine. Now, it's not an exact science with birch sap from birch trees. It does vary tree to tree, and it does depend quite heavily on seasons, and I am not even going to pretend that I can explain all the differences between the seasonal variants that will affect it. But generally they will start pushing that sap upwards and be able to be tapped from around mid-March to sort of mid to late April. Temperature and everything else depending though, it can start as early as February, and it can, February, I said that weird, February, and it can roll on until late April. So we'll give it a go and see what we get. So you're going to want a tree more than 25 centimeters diameter, ideally. Larger ones are better for this. Obviously smaller ones, you're going to do that much damage, you'll probably kill it. As you can see here, we've got a lovely bit of, I just slapped a slug. Sorry buddy, didn't see you there. Nice. Anyway, as you can see, this tree itself is quite a large one. It's quite a mature, nice adult tree, so it should have plenty of sap if we have got the right time of year. Now, if you're doing this regularly, you need to select a different tree each year, as once you've done it to one tree, you need to give it a resting time, a couple of years, to let it sort of recuperate. A big healthy tree like this, if we take something like a litre out of it, you're not going to do it much harm, in all fairness. But, you know, select your trees carefully. One of the ways to know if your tree is going to give sap is to poke a knife in it in an upwards direction, leave it there for a few minutes, just draw that blade back out a little bit and see if you've got sap coming out of the tree. If you do, it's good to go. So a little while ago, I've just dropped my phone in a pocket that I know has a hole in it. That's foolish. A little while ago when I got here, probably 10-15 minutes ago, I just stuck my knife into this tree here, pointed slightly upwards, and obviously the knife itself is plugging the hole, so I'm just going to pull that out a little bit and see if we, oh yeah, there's sap running right there, look. See it? That's not rainwater, it's coming from where I've stabbed my knife into the tree there. Fresh. I don't know if you guys can actually see that, but I think it is wet. There is the birch bark, so I'll just put my knife back in that hole, plug it up a little bit, and yeah, look, it's proper dripping off that bit. Look, a droplet of birch sap. Ta-da! So I shall just leave my knife in the tree, plug in that hole while I go and get some other bits of equipment. So, take that out of the tree now, we know where the hole is we want to make. And I've got my lovely old school hand auger here. There's the hole. Now you want the hole to go slightly upwards into the tree, and you only want to be about 3 centimeters into it. If it's a tree that's going to give good sap, which I'm pretty sure this one is because it's dripping away quite happily, by the time you get halfway in with your hole, it should start running quite well. So let's give that a test. Classic hand auger on the go here. There we go. Use the auger bit to just clean the hole a little bit. Magic. So you want your hole, through drill bit out, just slackened it up. You want your hole in the tree to be about 1 metre off the ground for the best sort of sap production. And then There's a few different ways of doing this, but what I'm going to do is use a piece of brewing pipe that I've got. Ta-da! Now, don't let its funny yellowy colour put you off. It is sterile and clean. It's just I've used this for years for making wines and beers and all of that. So it has taken on that colour. Lovely. And that hole could be a little bit deeper. Yeah, I'm just going to deepen that hole just a touch. So I have inadvertently selected the wrong auger bit and made my hole in my tree a little too big. So what I'm going to do is use some of this natural garden twine to thicken my hose up and make a bit of a plug to stop the tree over bleeding. And it won't do it any good, and encourage it to actually go down my pipe. For the second one I'll make a slightly better judgment call on the old auger bit selection. You see what I'm doing down there. There we go. Making sure that my cord plug is nice and firmly in, so that we don't get too much leaking where we don't want leaking from. Now all I'm going to do, nice clean water bottle, and I'm going to set the water bottle down here with the pipe going into it. And then what I'm going to do is tie the bottle to the tree just with some cord, just so it doesn't blow away or what other means get interfered with by an animal or anything like that. Oh, there we go, look. That's running. Lovely. So now, need my cord. So I'm just going to fasten this bottle to the tree, stop it falling over or disappearing as it fills. So I'm also just going to secure that pipe to the tree because I'm a bit concerned that it's going to catch the wind and start blowing it around everywhere. And obviously if it blows my pipe out my bottle, then there's just going to be a load of birch sap on the floor, and that's not really very useful. So I'll just tie this around there. Now, I don't know if it's because we've had such a wet year. A great big splat of water on the camera lens. This is what I always say about filming in the rain. Like, obviously the GoPro is waterproof, I'm fairly waterproof. That doesn't stop it not being helpful when you get great big splats of water landing on your camera lens. So I don't know whether it's because we've had such a wet start to the year, but we've already got, can't get this camera level, we've already got quite a lot of it collected in the bottom of the bottle. You can just see down there already, it's already quite a lot. Now generally with this you would come back after 24 hours. Today it's actually not looking like it needs 24 hours, to be fair. My cord plug around my pipe is working. That's what was there a minute ago. It's not running out of there, which is good, because like I say, I don't want to waste it and just have it going into the ground for nothing. The tree won't appreciate that. But that is one tapped birch tree, and as you can see down there, Well, I hope you can see, you can never be too sure. It is just dripping into the bottle very nicely. Excellent. So, let's go tap another one. So here's another nice, large adult birch tree in good health. It's got sign of leaf growth going on it already. That's a good start. Absolutely no point tapping into a dead tree. That is not going to do anything for you whatsoever. Unfortunately though, I don't quite have as much pipe as I need. I've only got a little piece left here, so what I'm going to do is just tie my bottle about half a metre up the tree or so to save me pipe. Yeah, tie it to the tree. Bushcraft problems require bushcraft solutions. And as always when you're doing this, try and find trees that are a little off the beaten track, a little out of the way, where you're not going to have people finding them, interfering with them or stuff like that. Because if people find them and they haven't got a clue what they are, they get a little over curious and they start interfering with your stuff, and that's not what you want. Some people might see this and think that you're doing harm. You're not at all. You won't harm the trees by doing this. They can easily afford to lose a couple of litres. They're that sort of tree that over prepares. Although it does just suggest what many of us already know about the birch tree, and that is that the birch tree is a magical tree really that just keeps on giving and giving and giving. It is a brilliant tree for so many things, not least fire. You know, it gives us wonderful, wonderful fires. And an interesting thing about birch for fire, I read this in a book about Astrout, the Norse faith, the Viking religion if you will, and it said that Vikings used to enjoy burning birch wood, particularly after battles, as there's something in the oils in the birch bark and the birch wood that when burnt produces quite a powerful antidepressant. So when you breathe in the smell around a fire that's burning birch on it, it is actually quite a good pick-me-up antidepressant feel about it, apparently. Which I honestly believe wholeheartedly, because let's be honest with you, when have you ever been around a campfire and felt miserable? I never have. So birch is also a very, very interesting tree for many reasons. It's not just good for us, birch trees are also good for woodlands in general, because anywhere that you get an empty patch of woods, you'll find that birch is one of the first trees to colonise pretty much anywhere sort of northern hemisphere. Your birches will be the ones that sort of move in first to any empty areas. And what's good about that is, for other trees, birches themselves don't actually live all that long. They've probably only got 60, 70 years in them. Yes, there will be some that have gone longer than that, obviously, and some that live a lot shorter than that, but generally they're only 60, 70 years living as a tree. But if they're in areas where there is not many other trees about, the birch growing there, living there and dying there, it helps to convert the soil and make it more nutrient rich, which then supports other trees growing with it. And a very interesting thing about trees is they're not as inert as you might think. I've just took the bottle cap off before I drilled the hole. That's a silly thing to do. They're not as inert or as sort of still lifey as you might think. All the trees in a woodland are vying for position against each other. They all obviously want the sunlight. Now, some trees won't tolerate other trees being around them at all, which is why certain types of tree you'll never find growing next to each other. And things like oak, which oaks obviously, everybody knows oaks are big strong trees, but oaks can be incredibly stubborn as well, and they can basically choke the life out of other trees that grow around them. They can emit chemicals into the soil to inhibit other growth, but pretty much all trees get along with the birch, because having it there is helpful and it does you a favour. Birch is also one of the trees that breaks down after death really quickly. Like they don't hang around for it. Like oaks, there's bits of oak where everywhere around here. This woodland I'm in right now, it's kind of a planted woodland. I don't think many of the trees here are that old. There are some really old birches and oaks that have obviously survived being cut over the years, but most of this is a planted woodland. And you've got bits of dead oak and stuff that's still standing that have probably been here my entire life. In fact, over the field over there, there's an oak tree skeleton that's been there all the time that I have been alive, and it's still stood. Whereas I have seen birch die, decompose in my lifetime, and you know, it's really good for all the small life, your beetles, larvae, for things like that, and insects, which in turn is good for birds. And that rotting wood is brilliant for the forest floor and for the nutrients, but also for lots of different types of fungus and things like that, which are really, really helpful if you know anything about it. Birch polypore being one of my favourite that grows on dead birch. We'll touch on that another time. Anyway, let's stop waffling about birch trees and get this tap in. I'm really quite impressed with these auger bits I've managed to purchase. They were very cheap, but they're doing the job really rather nicely. I think I mentioned this earlier, when you drill your hole, try and do it just a little bit upwards into the tree. Slight upward angle. Right, let's have a look at that. This all seems very dry and woody in here. Usually, once you're a little way in, you tend to get the sap collecting and running out straight away. This chap seems to be a little on the dry side. Let's have a look. That's because I tied my bottle first, you see. The tree's saying no thanks. Right, let's just give that a few minutes. Oh, I can see liquid now, I think we're all right. Just as a point of health for the trees that you are tapping, if you drill into one and you don't get any sap leaking out and it's a bit of a dud, you're not going to get your material, it might not mean that there's anything wrong with the tree or it's in bad health. I did mention at the start of this that it's not an exact science with the timing of when they're going to produce this sap. So if you have drilled a hole into a tree, got no sap whatsoever coming out, and you decide that's a useless tap, you need to move on, find another one, that's cool, but you must plug the hole. So make another stick about the size of the diameter of the hole you've done, clean the bark off it, because obviously bacteria and things like that, most of those will be harboured in barks and, you know, yeasts and things like that. Make a plug, hammer it into your hole, just so when that tree does start giving sap, it's not got a wound that it's going to be leaking and leaking and leaking and wasting its effort from. What you can do as well, once you've put your peg in and you've closed that wound up, if you can, there's pines usually everywhere, if you find a pine that's leaking a bit of pine sap, you can also just add an extra seal around it with pine sap, because pine sap is incredibly disinfectant. It's incredibly powerful at stopping bacteria and things like that from growing, so that would just help seal that wound, and then the tree will grow around that and close it up itself. You don't want to be leaving an open wound on it, because we're not here to murder trees. We want this sap for a purpose. So, in that time when I was having a little waffle to the camera, we are running sap. Nice, good, clear sap. It's like water, but with a sort of a sweety, earthy, slightly citrusy flavour. So I have changed my auger bit, so this pipe should be a much nicer fit into the tree. I am actually still going to make a bung on it. Decided I quite like that idea, that I'm just going to use this hempy garden string here to make a bit of a bung around the pipe, just to help seal it a little better and try and save any waste. So into the hole it goes, lovely, nice and in there. Let's get the old knifey now. Oh, look, I can see it running down the pipe already. Oh, look, it's coming. You see the end of the pipe? Lower the camera. Ah. Oh yeah, look at that. Magic. We got some down there, Luke? Yep, we do. Get my hand in shot. Excellent. Bit of grit in that. Could be the inside of my pipe, or it could be just coming out of where I've drilled the hole. Oh, there's a great load of it there. I need to stop talking nonsense, get this pipe cropped a little bit. So I know that quite often when you see people in the woods, you may do this yourself, I'm not telling you off for it, but quite often when you are in the woods or you see people in the woods, you might see them like sticking axes in trees. It looks like I was struggling to cut that then. It's not. It's this knife. I pretty much give it a tickle on a ceramic stone every time I've used it. It is literally shave your face razor sharp. So if it looks like I'm struggling, it's not that I'm struggling. I'm actually just being really cautious with it because I don't want to slip with it. One slip with this blade and you'll be losing a piece of yourself. Stick that in there. Anyway, as I was saying, sorry, you might be one of the people who do, or you might see people doing it, sticking axes and things into trees to store them and stuff like that. Now, I'm not going to tell you off about that. It's not something I like doing. You've seen me throwing axes into dead trees, which no problem at all. Personally don't like sticking axes and things in living trees because obviously you're wounding them and they leak. Well, pines it's not so bad because they've got a really thick sap and they seal themselves better, but at this time of year it's no time of year to be doing such things to birch trees, just sticking knives and axes in them just for storing them or whatever, because as you see quite clearly it's just going to bleed and bleed and bleed, and the more sap it loses into the ground for no good reason, well the worse that tree's health is actually going to be. And naturally, trees being trees, this tree's got a nice growing season ahead of it, and I'm sure it would like to make the most of it and the sap that it's collected and made over the last year. So something I did forget to say that you can do with birch sap is you can reduce it down to birch syrup, which I'm told is a lot like maple syrup. I've made wine with it before, but I've never boiled it down into birch syrup, but I'm told it's quite sweet and nice like maple syrup, so might give that a go. Depends how much I get out of it really. I've made sure that the bottles I'm using are over a litre because ideally you want to leave it about 24 hours. The only thing is these trees today are being unusually giving straight off the bat. They're just dripping away with it, so I might get more than I hoped for, in which case I won't be wasting it by running out on the ground because I've got like 2 litre bottles, so it should collect it anyway, but I'll come back slightly earlier than 24 hours I think, just in case. But we have already the first tap there is going really quite nicely, up to about there already, which is nice. Okay, crystal clear. That's what it should be like. If you've got a good healthy tree with nice good healthy sap, it should be really clear. It should look pretty much like just fresh water. No hint of colour about it really. It might come out sometimes just the slightest bit like opaque opaque clear, but you don't want it if it's cloudy and stuff like that. I've never had that. I've never tapped a tree and had it come out weird and cloudy. I've seen people who reckon they do. I don't know if that's a time of year thing or something like that, but we are at the moment all tapped and dribbling away. So I am going to come back tomorrow, check on my tap's progress, and then hopefully turn it into wine. So just on my way out of the woods now, river and everything roaring away. There's me woodland in the background there. I've been in and out of these woods and across these fields since I was a very, very small child. There's always been a little bit of a wetland over here, a bit of a marshy bog. Apologies if the footage is a bit shaky. I haven't actually got a gimbal for the GoPro. I usually just use a stand. Anyway, it's always been a bit boggy here, but over the last couple of years it has slowly turned itself into a large natural pond, and it's just interesting. Well, it's interesting to me. It's very sort of it's indicative of the ever-changing landscape of the UK, these magical little islands, that these things happen. I've seen so many landscapes just change over just my lifetime. I'm only 39, it's not like I'm ancient or anything, but this literally just used to be a boggy patch over there by those oak trees. Now it's a whole wetland of its own, complete with ducks and moorhens and Canada geese and all of that. And there's an even bigger piece opened up next to it over there, which I don't mind. I think it's great. It's just, like I say, it amazes me how many of these natural wetlands I've seen pop up, and natural ponds and things over the time. I mean, I love a good pond, but I just think that's quite special that even in one person's lifetime you can see the landscape change and evolve. And it does come in handy when you've got running water like this to wash the old wellies off, get a bit of the muddiness off them. Magic. And who doesn't love the sound of running water? And who knows, another year or two of these being here and they might end up full of fish, particularly if somebody catches some and throws some fish in there. I mean, I might. So this is where it just used to be a bit of a boggy patch. You can see over there where all the marshy bits are. That's where it started, and it's been that way for a very, very long time. But then over the recent times it's just grown into a big old pond. These little birdies everywhere, absolutely loving it. And the ducks. There was some Canada geese here as I come walking into the woods, but they saw me come in and flew off, giving it the old as they do. Not thrilled by my presence. They've left evidence of themselves though, a white foamy layer and some feathers floating on the edge. And this is the second part that's just appeared. And it probably looks quite small through the camera, but it's very deep in the middle of there. It's a good 3 foot deep in the middle. It's deep enough that the cows won't go walking through it. So, nice little natural wetlands forming, which it's not a surprise. This last 2 years, my word, we've had some rainfall and all of that. Welcome to the UK. All we get's rain, but we'll see what the summer brings. But I do love a good wetland. If it keeps on growing like this, I might have to bring a kayak down. Funnily enough though, this pond here that's formed is a good few feet higher than the marshy bit over there, so I can't imagine that they're gonna join up at any point. They might. This one might form like a little waterfall into that one someday, but they're not going to join as like one actual lake, because this one must be a good 8-10 feet higher. So it's just interesting, slow turning into wetlands. Now I know there's a lot of farms around here. There's one in particular that I know of that had a massive problem with the field flooding, and they couldn't stop it from flooding no matter what they tried. In the end they actually dug it out a bit more, introduced more water, and they turned it into a fishing lake. So welcome back to the woods on this lovely day, or at least a much nicer day than it was yesterday, and success! Now I haven't quite left it 24 hours because yesterday when I was here, I was only here for like an hour. Excuse me, and I'd already got about that much collected at the bottom of the bottle. So I figured 24 hours is probably going to be a bit much. It's probably closer to about 12 hours since I was actually here. And if you hear the voices of little people, you're not tripping out. It is half term. My kids are frolicking around in the woods in the background. But take a look at this for a haul. Absolutely full to the brim. Magnificent. Both of them are as well. The other one is over yonder and filled to the brim. Look at that. Filled right up. So these are 1.5 litre bottles, 3 litres of it. That should make a fair decent brew. But before I can worry about that, we need to honour our commitment to nature and the tree itself and plug these holes up now so that the tree doesn't bleed too much. I don't want it losing sap that it doesn't need to. So I'm going to find a nice stick that I can make a plug for, and then carve it about the size to fit. So in my haste to get back to the woods, I've come out without a saw. Oh well. We've got axes and knives and other things. But it is now time to honour our commitment to this tree and stop that hole from leaking now. Now, when you plug in your tree, take your bark off the stick that you're using to plug it, because like I said, well, I say yesterday, this is all going to be in one video, but like I said, what will happen is your bark's got all your bacterias and things in it. So just going to neaten up this back edge a bit so that when I hammer it in, it doesn't all split. Nice peg. Just gently tap that home. So I've actually just found a little stash of pine resin. And what I'm doing is melting it with my lighter in the top of a Costa cup. Just as I do that, great big gust of wind. Warming it. And then, once it's nicely softened up, gum it in around the plug. That'll just make for a much nicer seal. So I'll finish this off, guys. I'll show you when I've done it. There we go. Nicely pegged in place, further sealed up by pine resin. See there, nicely sealed around with a bit of pine resin. Even with all that, it'll still weep just a little bit, but a good thing to do is, especially with birch trees, is if you can find a dead, relatively dry birch stick of the right diameter for your hole, clean your bark off it so it's nice and clean, hammer that in, and because it's dry wood, as the birch sap soaks into it, it will expand further, plug up the hole for you. But before I go and sort out the other one, the other tap, just get this pine sap off my hands. Very sticky. Yeah. It smells delightful though. Let's have a taste of this lovely high quality woodland product here. Oh, that's really refreshing. Every year I surprise myself with this stuff. I'm at the second tap. Made a slightly thicker peg this time, so I shouldn't have to resin seal it. We'll just get this pipe out. If you can see, yeah, there we go. I have kind of annoyed myself a little bit by forgetting the saw to neaten up these holes, but I'm in these woods a lot, so I will probably nip back at some point and just neaten these off. Yeah, that's doing the job, and because that's nice and dry, that will expand and properly plug that hole up. And once again, down here we have somewhere to have a bottle cap. There we go. And we have another lovely full container of birch sap. Well then, that's enough for the woodland part. I now need to get this good stuff out of the woods and go and turn it into wine. Right then, so that's all the birch liquid collected. Nice birch sap. Time to turn it into wine. So what you're going to need yourselves is a stove. Doesn't have to be an ancient paraffin stove if you don't have one. Any will do. Nice big old brewing pan. Here's my lovely birch sap. 3 litres of it has sat in the fridge for a little while. Just keeping it cool so it doesn't go off. And now all we're going to do is bring it to a gentle boil. Don't boil the living death out of it, but just a gentle boil. Because we're going to dissolve some sugar in it, because birch sap will brew on its own just with yeast, but it'll be a very small reaction and you wouldn't really call it wine. It'd come out the strength of a weak beer. It only really has 0.7% of sugar in it, glucose and stuff like that. Even though you can taste that it is sweet when you drink it, it doesn't have that much. So we're going to add a little bit of white sugar into it. Really, same as a lot of wines that aren't particularly sweet from the get-go. A kilo of sugar for every 5 litres, so a kilo of sugar per gallon really is more than enough. I haven't quite got 5 litres myself, so what I'm going to do is add just a bit less than an entire kilogram of sugar. If you've watched my other winemaking video, stuff like that I've done, you know that I don't bother with weighing scales or anything. Just whop it in. It makes no difference. You don't have to get obsessive over your measurements. It really doesn't matter that much. I know that if you buy books on winemaking or you watch things online, they really like to faff with it, like 1 tablespoon of la-di-da, and like, oh god, just chuck it in. Because it'll all brew, it'll all be safe, it'll all taste nice. People just get really pernickety. Certain wines have obviously got certain recipes, but that's not what we're doing here. We're making homemade wine. As long as it creates alcohol and it's got some flavour, that's tickety-boo. So, I'm just going to invert or dissolve just a little less than a kilo of sugar into it. That'll do. It's probably like an 1/8 of the bag left there. And then, just before we get stirring it up, just to add a little flavour to it, a bit of citrus blast to it, I can wring out a lemon into it. Now, the advantage of a wine such as this with your birch sap and a lot of other things where you've just got lemons and stuff like that is you don't get much sediment in them. They're really quite clear from the get-go, which is handy. It makes it a lot easier, a lot less sort of transferring them around to different vats. So what I'm going to do is squeeze the lemon into it, and then I'll just drop what's left of the lemon's corks in there and let that get heated up with the water, get that flavour out. Actually, no, I've changed my mind. I am not going to do that. I am not going to put the lemon in because I don't want it to boil the bitterness out of the skin. So I think what I'll do instead of boiling the lemon's carcass in there is just use 2 lemons and squeeze them. Because sometimes when you boil the lemon skins or lime skins or orange peels, I seem to be squirting lemon on the stove bottom. Anything with a rind on it that you boil, the skins tend to be a little on the bitter side. Depends what sort of a wine you're making. With some wines it works really well. So, it's warming up nicely, the sugar is nicely dissolving to me liquor. What I'm going to do personally, this is up to you guys if you want to do this, you can use different things than what I am. You just can drop a peppermint tea bag in it. And just let that have a little soak, let that flavour it a little bit. I've made wines before with peppermint, strawberry and peppermint. Mwah, beautiful. So we'll just infuse a little peppermint tea bag in there. Just give it a tickle of more flavour. It's got such an interesting colour about it. It's just a little bit different to the colour of water. It's just a tiny bit not quite as clear. But other than that, it is basically birch sap. It's just like the freshest, cleanest spring water you've ever had in your life. So just while that finishes warming up, what I'm actually using to brew this in is a 5 litre plastic water bottle. I did used to have absolutely loads of the glass 5 litre demijohns, but unfortunately I decided to swap to the 25 litre food grade plastic vats because making 5 litres of wine to me seemed a little pointless. So I gave all of my glassware to a friend who brews. He likes to use the glass stuff, I prefer the larger stuff. Obviously there is no point using a 25 litre vat when I've hardly got 5 litres of the liquid to start out with. So one of these, clean. If you buy this from the shop full of water, you can just use the water as part of your wine process, but it'll already be sterile. Cleanliness with winemaking is important. You don't want to start off with something that's infected with bacteria straight away. Obviously as it starts to brew, it kills all of that for you, but if you start off with a dirty vessel, it's not going to help. So make sure your equipment is sterile and clean. And I'm going to pour it in through the sieve, just in case the sieve might stop any bits of lemon or lemon seed from making it in. It just makes it a clearer product in the end. And with this one, I really wanted to come out at the end product being as clear as water, really, because that's how it came out of a tree. So it's basically just going to look like water, but it'll be a bit sort of spritzy with a nice lemony flavour and a nice alcoholic kick to it. It's nearly warm enough at the moment. I don't want it too boiling hot anyway because I don't want it melting my container, but I just want it enough to infuse the minty tea bag and to melt the sugar's all melted into the water now anyway, so that should be just about ready to transfer. So check my temperature. Oh yeah. Lovely. Stove off. Now obviously this mint tea bag would have infused a little better had I have boiled it. Doesn't matter. I only wanted to have a hint of it. Lovely. I'm going to keep hold of this thing because obviously this plastic container on the bottom really isn't very light. Give me a tea bag because if I chuck the tea bag in. Now after I've filled this up, you can't put your yeast in straight away, you need it to cool down a bit. Yeast prefers to be around room temperature for best effect, but if you drop it in water that's like a lot hotter than that, it will kill it straight off the bat, and you'll be wondering days later, like, why is it not reacting? It's not doing anything. It's probably because you boiled your yeast to death. So I'm going to fill this up and then let it cool down. So that's cooled down to about room temperature now. Time to drop my yeast in. Usually it's about 5 grams of yeast for a gallon, but make sure that you are using wine making yeast. Please do not use baking yeast. It doesn't work very well at all, and it absolutely stinks while it's brewing. It doesn't work very well. You can get your wine yeast from all over the place. You can get it online. This actually came from Wilco. Unfortunately, Wilco's no longer with us, but it's about, don't use baking yeast. I said that about 5 grams for a gallon is more than enough. I have given up measuring things these days. I'll just whop a load in and it'll do its work. Magic. Oh, that's what we like. It all starts to sink and stir itself up. So now I'm going to let that rest a little while, let it start reacting, let the yeast start doing their work. If you are going to brew in a container like this, which I obviously aren't bothering using the air trap, because as soon as it's finished reacting, it's going to get either bottled or I'm going to drink it. Make sure if you're using a container like this, don't screw the lid proper shut and seal it, because the yeast gives off a lot of carbon dioxide as it's converting the sugar to alcohol, and if you do seal that lid shut, it will most likely burst or quite violently explode. So leave it open so the gas can escape. So we'll come back to that in just a little while. So it's been a couple of days since I started that off, and it is all busy bubbling away. All the carbon dioxide is rising out of it, which means the reaction is well and truly underway. You can smell it. I know people say that there's no smell to carbon dioxide. Maybe not. Whoa.
Well, it certainly gives you a tickle at the back of your throat, which lets you know there's no oxygen in it. There's pure carbon dioxide coming out of it. That is lovely. I would show you the bubbles rising, but I don't think you'd be picked up by the camera particularly well. So I think that's about as much as we really need to go in onto the birch tapping and making the birch sap wine. I will make another video when this is finished. I'll get it bottled up, and we'll go to the woods, have a fire or something, and enjoy this lovely birch sap wine when it's ready. At the moment it's gone very cloudy and stuff, which is perfectly normal in the brewing process, as all the gases, you know, it was crystal clear. Now it's just gone cloudy and all that, but it will. That's perfectly natural as the yeast converts the sugar into alcohol. When it starts to finish that and the reaction starts to end its reacting time, it will clear itself right up. You'll see that when it's finished. But other than that, guys, that is pretty much all we need to do for that. So as always, get yourselves out there, get bushcrafting, get winemaking, be safe and have fun. All I need to say. And that is me gone for another video. Don't forget to subscribe. Unless you think it's rubbish, in which case don't bother.